Hi, Melissa. Can you hear
Hi
me?
there, how's it going?
Ah, fine. We can see you. Yeah, you're moving. Great. How do I get her up in like? Let's just go like this. Okay.
Okay,
I didn't introduce you, so I'm just going to do that really quick. This is Melissa
okay.
Gordon. She is a new professor at the Academy of Fine Arts in Oslo, and I was going to do this, but we're so late that I sort of like rushed everything. But I was going to say that she is going to tell us about fees in different countries, in America, in the UK, and in Switzerland, where she's living. All these countries have
Oh,
no where you're living in. Sorry. Anyway, all these countries have fees. And you know the difference, we were talking about Margaret Thatcher earlier, and the difference between who is able to have an art education in England today versus 15 years ago. So what happens when schools are art schools have fees that is only for rich people and that is so expensive, and what is the consequences when you look at art in a long term perspective?
okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna talk. I wrote something just to also talk about my experience as a student in America because I've not taught so much there, but I'll just read what I've written and then hopefully it kind of goes over everything, including the fees in the UK. So I can only speak from my experience as a teacher in regards to the relationship between fees and sorry, and student expectations and experiences. So even though I've taught at a number of different institutions, each one always has a particular and specific situation for its students. And I would say personally that the student-led approach to addressing concerns at school, students being open with their teachers, but also understanding sort of what circumstances can be changed by the teachers, what can be changed by the institution, and then also empowering themselves to understand what can be changed by their own actions is really important. So I studied in two places in America. For my undergraduate at the Rhode Island School of Design and at Cooper Union. Cooper Union is a free school now again, and RISD was not. Cooper was based in New York, and it had contemporary artists such as Jacqueline Humphreys and Lorna Simpson as
I
my
think you have
teachers.
to just talk a little bit slower because there are so many people who doesn't understand English.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah, just a little
we'll
bit.
see if I make my 10 minutes or
Yeah,
not.
yeah, I know.
And there were hundreds of galleries around in New York and museums to go see. RISD, on the other hand, was in a small little haunted town of Providence, Rhode Island. It was cheap to live, and the studios were open all night. And as students at RISD, we taught each other skills. So if someone was studying glass or ceramics or weaving or fabric printing or silkscreen or welding or animation, a lot of the students would like share these knowledges with each other, what they were learning. Whereas my experience at Cooper as a student, the students weren't as, I would say, supportive of each other. But so in this kind of respect, it's like even though Cooper was free and RISD was not, still this sense of sort of how you develop a community was really important. But then on the other hand, what I saw a lot of at RISD as a student was that students from less privileged backgrounds, students that were on scholarships, but still had to work sort of almost full time, were punished, were kicked out of the course, or were put on probation if their grades weren't good enough. But which I think was a real shame. And then also what happened at RISD was that a lot of times students worked at jobs that were provided for by the school, which I felt was a really great system of supporting students while they're in school and then also running the facilities as well. So then, as a teacher, I began teaching in Knoxville, Tennessee, at a really great small state school. So, state schools in America are much cheaper than private schools. And if you live in state, then you get a reduced sort of set of fees. I taught I was hired by and taught by a man named Michael Brackett, who was a teacher of like a group of great artists in America, such as like Josh Smith, Kelly Walker, Seth Price and Meredith Sparks, and they all came from this tiny little state school in the middle of nowhere in Tennessee. Um, because my set up an artist in residency program in order to bring contemporary artists in for 6 months at a time and pay them a full-time wage. So all the students were locally from Tennessee, and a majority were paying a very small amount to go to school. And also the school gave them jobs to support them. What was hard at that school was imagining then how students would leave this kind of environment and go to a bigger city, even though I found they took a lot of risks with their work and were kind of able to work quite hard. I've also taught a lot in the UK, which you were mentioning. So I've been a visiting lecturer at a number of universities there, including Kingston, Oxford, Newcastle, Brighton, Liverpool, and I've also been a permanent lecturer of fine art at Goldsmiths University. So the situation for students in the UK is all technically the same. So whether you're in Liverpool or Glasgow or Oxford, to a certain extent, you're paying the same fees or you have the same relationship to fees. Student fees were introduced in the UK in 1998, and then they were around £4,000 a year until 2012 when they were raised up to £9,000 a year. So this actually shifted. So I was teaching in 2012, and the first students that I was teaching who were on the lower set of fees, and then after 3 years, the students that I was teaching were starting to pay the higher set of fees. So what's also kind of maybe interesting is that the increase in fees in the UK didn't actually represent a change in any sort of payment to the teachers. And in fact, it didn't represent any sort of change in terms of facilities from what I saw at my school, at different schools. And so what I did notice happening is that a lot of the students started having to work more. They started having to have more full-time jobs, more permanent jobs that they were doing during their studies, and I found that it was something that could be seen as being taking away from their time at school. So, but also just to point out that the situation in the UK is such that the students don't have to pay those £9,000 straight away. Instead, what they do is they can get a grant from the government. It pays for it. So when students are accepted to UK universities, they're not accepted on the basis of whether or not they can pay the fee at all. Instead, that is a debt that then they acquire, and then they have to start paying that debt after they start earning a certain amount of money. So when they declare their taxes after they're out of school, if they're starting to earn over £25,000 a year, then the government starts taking out a certain percentage based on their wages. So this is a debt that students live with for the rest of their lives, but I don't see it in the UK, at least, as being something that decides who and who cannot go. Although obviously a lot of younger people might decide not to go to university if they don't want to take that debt on. But for me as a teacher, what I saw as an effect was this idea of sort of how money works for students at the time. Not only are they having to work to support themselves because they're living in an expensive place, but they're also having to work to pay for supplies. And that's something that I noticed a lot. It was when certain students got grants for supplies, they really all of a sudden felt they could make all this work, and I really think that's quite important. And I'll just have sort of one last thing to say. So, as my own experience, I had the privilege to study at a place called The Ateliers in Amsterdam when I was just 21 years old, and I was given a really big studio and a cheap apartment and 10,000 euros a year to live on and buy art supplies for 2 years. So it was a very privileged position, I think, but that level of support was really transformative. And at the same time as it being transformative, a lot was expected of me. And also there was this sort of attempt by the people that were there to form a really strong community. So I guess I wanted to summarize by saying that for me, from my experiences as a student in different art schools, but also as a teacher, that time and the freedom and money that is allowed for art students to work is really important. And maybe art schools address not just sort of issues around space and fees, but also issues of how students can afford to live in the places and also get supplies in the places where they're working so they can experiment. I would say students are very much their own bosses of forging the communities that they're in. It's up to them to sort of make friends and learn skills from other students. But it's more difficult if they don't have the time to socialize with each other. And also, if you leave students in a huge amount of debt afterwards, then they're less able as artists down the line to take chances or again sort of experiment with supplies that they can afford. So yeah, I think this
just
kind
one
of notion
question.
of
One question, Melissa. You haven't been teaching in Norway that long, but can you like recognize any difference in the Norwegian students or the student mass in Norway than the other countries that you've been teaching?
I mean, it's interesting. I just taught a course last week, and it actually felt quite similar. I mean, that's why I bring it up, because it's like even though students in Norway are definitely, I think, they're not going into debt by going to school. They are, I think, to a large extent, they're supported. But supplies are also really expensive for them. And you see this sort of, yeah, I don't know. I noticed when I was teaching the course that still something like that is limiting. If you don't feel like you can get like gesso, then how are you going to feel that you can kind of make a bad painting, which you need to do to make a good painting.
That's true. Thank you.
So I think
we have to go to lunch, but I have to say thank you so much for doing this. And I hope I'll see you live very soon.
Yeah,
we've been talking on this all the time.
This week.
No, that's
great to hear about it. So.
Say thank you, everyone. Okay. See ya. Bye.